Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the mind of an 11th century polymath whose discoveries fundamentally shaped the modern world you and I live in right now. I'm talking about the legendary scientist, mathematician, and astronomer Ibn al-Haytham. Seriously, if you've ever worn glasses, snapped a photo on your phone, or even just marveled at how your own eyes process the world around you, you owe a massive debt to this brilliant thinker from the Islamic Golden Age. So let's just jump right in. If learning the truth is the scientist's goal, then he must make himself the enemy of all that he reads. Wow. Just let that sink in for a second. We are talking about a time, 1,000 years ago, when ancient texts were treated as absolute, unquestionable gospel. Yet here is Ibn al-Haytham boldly declaring that to find the real truth, you have to relentlessly question, challenge, and test everything you were told. He wasn't just passively reading history, he was actively dismantling it to build something better. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start off with the father of modern optics, then move into how he was revolutionizing how we see. After that, we'll cover the first scientific method, his role in inspiring the European Renaissance, and we'll wrap up with his global modern legacy. All right, kicking things off with Chapter 1, the father of modern optics. To truly appreciate his genius, we need to set the scene in the vibrant Islamic Golden Age. Born around 965 in Basra, Ibn al-Haytham, or al-Hazim, as he was later known in Latin, eventually made his way to the wealthy Fatimid capital of Cairo. Now, here's a wild detail. To get out of a highly dangerous engineering project for a pretty volatile caliph, he famously feigned madness and was placed under house arrest for years. But honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened, because during this confinement between 1011 and 1021, he had the perfect isolation to author his absolute magnum opus before passing away around 1040. This guy carried some serious intellectual weight, both in his own era and for centuries after. Today, we know him as the father of modern optics. But even shortly after his lifetime, the historian Abul Hasan Baihaqi dubbed him the second Ptolemy. I mean, that is literally putting him on the exact same pedestal as the greatest astronomer of antiquity. Later on, the European scholar John Peckham simply referred to him as the physicist. He also went by names tying him to the lands that nurtured his genius, like al-Basri for his birthplace and al-Misri for his time in Egypt. Moving right along to Chapter 2, revolutionizing how we see. Okay, this is where the science gets super cool, connecting his 11th century breakthroughs straight to your everyday life. If you take just one thing away from this explainer, let it be the Kitab al-Manazir, or the Book of Optics. Written during that incredibly prolific house arrest, this isn't just an old book, it is the absolute foundation of modern optics. See, before Ibn al-Haytham, there were all these conflicting theories about how vision worked. A lot of ancient Greeks, like Euclid and Ptolemy, actually believed our eyes shot out rays of light that physically touched the objects we were looking at, like laser beams. Well, Ibn al-Haytham took that theory, tested it, and proved it entirely wrong. So how does it actually work? It breaks down into 3 simple steps. Think about what you're doing right now. You're looking at a screen. How does that image register for you? Ibn al-Haytham was the very first person in history to nail this. Step 1, light reflects off the object you're looking at. Step 2, that reflected light travels into your eyes. But it's Step 3 that is truly mind-blowing for the 11th century. He demonstrated that vision doesn't actually happen in the eyes at all, it happens in the brain. Your eyes are basically just lenses collecting light, but your brain is what actually builds the image. We completely take that for granted today, but back then, earth-shattering. Which brings us to Chapter 3, the first scientific method. As incredible as his actual discoveries were, what made him a true titan of history was how he discovered them. He had this strict, non-negotiable rule. A hypothesis must be proved by experiments based on confirmable procedures or mathematical evidence. Basically, you can't just rely on philosophy, clever debates, or ancient assumptions to understand physics anymore. You need hard, replicable proof. Got a theory? Great. Now design a physical experiment to test it or prove it with rigorous math. This is literally the bedrock of all modern STEM fields. To really put the sheer scale of this achievement into perspective, think about his 11th century methodology compared to the famous 16th century Renaissance scientific method. He was essentially drawing up the blueprint for modern science 5 whole centuries before Renaissance thinkers formalized it. 500 years. His insistence on mathematical proof and physical experiments over just observing or philosophizing makes him one of the very first true scientists in human history. And that leads us perfectly into Chapter 4,
inspiring the European Renaissance.
Now, nobody figures this stuff out in a vacuum, right? Ibn al-Haytham built on the massive foundational work of Greek and Islamic giants. Think Aristotle, Euclid, Ptolemy, Al-Kindi, and Ibn Sahl. He studied all of them rigorously. But what made his work distinguishably novel was that relentless experimental approach we just talked about. He absorbed their wisdom, sure, but he never let it constrain his own physical experiments.
So, what happened to all this brilliant research? Well, his masterpiece, the Book of Optics, eventually got translated into Latin under the title De Aspectibus. And let me tell you, this translation spread like wildfire through medieval Europe. It became the gold standard textbook on optics for centuries, directly influencing major European scholars and fundamentally shaping the scientific awakening of the European Renaissance. His ideas just rippled outward and completely altered the trajectory of Western science, a total game changer.
Finally, let's explore Chapter 5, A Global Modern Legacy.
You might be wondering, does an 11th century physicist really still matter in the 21st century? The answer is resounding yes. In 2015, the UN declared the International Year of Light to highlight optical technologies. And to anchor this whole global initiative, UNESCO, alongside the 1001 Inventions Organization, launched a massive worldwide campaign specifically to celebrate Ibn al-Haytham. We're talking Nobel laureates, scientists, and world leaders gathering in Paris simply to honor a 1,000-year-old legacy and its impact on sustainable development and light science.
And the sheer momentum of his legacy today is just staggering. The 1001 Inventions exhibition has been an absolute global phenomenon. He was the official mascot of the Beijing Science Festival. He's been featured at the Maker Faire in Cairo, Berlin Science Week, and the New York Academy of Sciences. There have been massive multi-city tours across Saudi Arabia, and over 24,000 students engage with his work at a single exhibit in the Jordan Museum. His story is crossing literally every cultural and geographic boundary.
But honestly, what I love most is how he is being kept alive in modern pop culture. We aren't just reading dusty old books anymore. They've built this giant 360-degree interactive camera obscura so people can literally step inside his mind. The late legendary actor Omar Sharif actually dedicated his final short film to playing the older Ibn al-Haytham. The acclaimed musician Sami Yusuf composed a sweeping original soundtrack for the campaign. There's even a gorgeous Arabic children's book spreading his story at international fairs. Art, film, and music are actively keeping the father of optics incredibly relevant for a whole new generation.
Which brings us to our final thought, and the question I want to leave you with today. How does the relentless curiosity of an 11th century pioneer continue to shape how you see the world? Because from the screens we stare at, to the cameras in our pockets, to the very scientific method we use to uncover the truth of our universe, Ibn al-Haytham is there. He taught us to be the enemy of all that we read, to test, to verify, and to never, ever stop seeking the light. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.